Not all of them, but a lot of them, man. Uh, and it's just funny. I need to look up the science behind that. Um, I know there's got to be some, but yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I guess it's just the mindlessness of it. But I get a ton of like melody ideas and song ideas in the shower. You know, grab my phone and hum a little voice memo in it, and that's how we got to 5 o'clock in the country chorus melody. It was just like just started.
The intersection of good drinks, good music, and good times. This is Hops and Spirits Bar Conversations.
The sun is shining and it's a brand new week here on the Bar Conversations, and we have a great episode for you as we talk with country musician, artist Jordan Rowe. His latest single, 5 o'clock in the country, is rocking right now, and if you haven't heard it, I think you need to. And we have a fun conversation as he was traveling to one of his shows. For our tasting notes, this one's a good one as we are getting into those cooler temps. It's the perfect time of year for those barrel-aged beers, and mainly we're talking bourbon barrel-aged beers. As you think of Goose Island, the Bourbon County release, locally in Kentucky where we're at, Braxton. Some others do those as well. So a lot of darker, heavier beers coming out. And by heavier, I mean ABV-wise, that you need to be careful for. But like I said, you don't need to be careful about this episode. Lots of fun, and let's get to it.
Did you know Hops and Spirits is more than just this podcast? Check out hopspirits.com for our latest episode release, past episodes, interviews with interesting folks in the alcohol industry, and so much more. Just go to hopspirits.com. Feel free to wait until this podcast is done.
We're back again with another Tasting Notes, and joining us once again is Kevin Patterson. He's a Cicerone National Beer Judge. He's also the manager of the Beer Trap craft beer store and bar in Lexington. Kevin, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on, and I can't wait to talk about some things coming up in the beer world.
Well, this time of year, we're getting very close to some of the big releases, the Goose Island, the Bourbon County, things like that. But you see those all over the place, I feel like. Even in the local markets, they kind of do theirs. I know here in Kentucky, Braxton has theirs, others as well. So it's barrel-aged beer season, which is technically all year round. But I feel like a lot of the bigger releases tend to come around this time.
They do. Certainly everybody's trying to figure out how to get into the market and provide customers with a flavor that's not current. Those beers, the barrel-aged beers, the big beers, they're around all year long. But, we still have that the ability to kind of eat and drink with the seasons. And so most people, they do prefer those bigger barrel-aged flavors, once the weather turns. And it sure turned this week. I know we had a little cold snap. We're getting ready to have another one. And people start to switch gears a little bit. They start to steer away maybe from the lighter beers of summer and starting into something a little bit more hearty.
Well, and with that comes, like I said, these mostly bourbon barrel style aged beers. You'll see them in a lot of stouts. Is that kind of what people are going to see, is more of those stouts, darker beers, or will there be some lighter ones as well?
I think so. I think there's, first of all, everybody does seem to have the strong affinity for the barrel-aged stouts. When we say barrel-aged, we're implying bourbon barrels. Here in the bluegrass, it's easy to assume the barrel implies bourbon, but there's other barrels out there too. Red wine barrels, cognac barrels, port barrels, Scotch barrels. All these barrels have been used for other beverages in the past. So brewers sometimes try to get their hands on some of those barrels to give their beer a little bit of uniqueness, give them a little bit of identity that maybe is hard to capture in another way. I know in the last 10 years, what we've seen when it comes to the barrel-aged trend is, I remember whenever I used to go on bourbon tours and I'd ask about barrels, I said, oh yeah, just come to the distillery, pick one up. They're about $50-$60, no big deal. And then you give one to your aunt, she would use it as a plant, or you give one to someone else, they chop it up and smoke their meats with it in the smoker. But now those days are long gone. Now there's a thing called the barrel broker. And so barrel brokers, their job is to, number one, keep the distilleries from being inundated with brewers who want to use those barrels. As soon as Goose Island came out with their Bourbon County Stout, everybody wanted to do that. And now there's 9,000 breweries in America, and all 9,000 breweries want barrels. So what these barrel brokers have done is they've collected all these barrels so that the distiller only has to deal with one individual or one small company. They come and get these barrels out of the way and they sell them to other brewers. And that's created this middle market or a middleman for the barrel industry. And it's kind of good for the distiller because they don't have to fuss with so much of the individual customers. But the bad news is, us as individuals, like beer drinkers that kind of want the planters, we want to put those things in air pellet smokers. We don't have access to those that much anymore. So what's happened is we get all these barrels kind of collected into like a big batch. And sometimes even the barrel broker doesn't know where the barrels came from or what kind of aging techniques that barrel went under. All they know is a barrel that once had bourbon. So they sell a lot of these to the brewers. And so the brewers then will just call it bourbon barrel aged beer. But what brewers I think would really like to do is single source barrels and say, this is an Elijah Craig, this is a Pappy beer. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of a struggle for those breweries to kind of fight back and create individual relationships with distillers, hoping they can get single source barrels so they can make their beer even more unique.
Well, and I was going to ask you about that, and that's the perfect segue. It's like we practiced this beforehand because you saw a little bit of that last year. Obviously, the Goose Island, they were very specific with who they were able to work with. I think Four Roses in Brooklyn did some things. Braxton and some of the local ones in Kentucky had a few different ones. It seems to me like that is the next phase of this where you do know where that is. And I feel like that is obviously you said it's the goal, but it seems to be beginning to happen now.
Yeah, just like in the summer, we talked about how it was popular to put the name Citra on an IPA, and it was a selling point. Well, the same thing happens with these beers. So if you can put Four Roses on a bottle of beer, Four Roses barrel, then all of a sudden it becomes a huge marketing opportunity for that brewer. Because bourbon, even though us here in the bluegrass, we understand the bourbon power. It's catching on everywhere. So you see those names, those brand names, they're so loyal that people really do want those, even if they're not necessarily a beer drinker, if they see Four Roses on a beer label, they're going to buy the beer.
Well, and it's a perfect way to possibly get some of those bourbon drinkers to take that step into the beer world a little more often than they do. And for those that are curious about what a barrel aged beer might taste like, what can they expect? Obviously, a higher ABV, but also there's some unique flavors that beer will pick up from those barrels.
Yeah, we'll take the stout, for instance. The normal stouts and the types of stouts that we're going to put into barrels are usually stronger imperial stouts with a little bit more body, a little bit more heft, more sweetness, more roast, and more alcohol that can handle the aging that goes on inside these barrels. Because once the beer is complete, that's whenever it enters the barrel. And the alcohol inside of the beer is actually going to act as a solvent and start to pull out some of the other flavors, some of those more finesse-oriented oils, and some of those other like coconut nuances, caramel nuances, toffee. Sometimes these, like the alcohol can sometimes taste like cherry. So you get a lot of those really neat kind of caramelized, savory, but also strongly fortified alcohol-wise flavors that's hard to achieve any other way. It just takes age on a kind of wood that's already soaked in all that bourbon. So what you get is these nuanced flavors of bourbon. So I tell folks, if you like the flavor of bourbon without the burn of a bourbon, then sometimes even a strong beer will help you get there.
Well, and the last thing I have on this too is they're going to probably expect the price to be up a little higher than they might normally be. And some of that is because they will sit in those barrels for three months, 6 months, some even longer, a year, which that is taking up valuable space in a brewery, which I'm sure all involved gets to that cost.
Yes, absolutely. Just like the distiller has a rick house where he stores his bourbons, well, the brewery needs some time to do that too, and there's some space to do that too. So they're going to put that beer in that barrel, and it doesn't come out the next day. It takes a long time sometimes. I know some of the more prized, bourbon barrel aged beers will stay in there for a year or longer. However, some have kind of learned to trim that up a little bit and get a lot of this same kind of flavors through other techniques. To kind of infuse those flavors into the beer without spending an entire year. But that's all resources. That's manpower. That's electricity. That's a building, a facility, and that's time. And whenever you decant those barrels, it's no guarantee that every barrel is going to have the amount of liquid in it that you anticipate, or the character of the liquid is going to be in the kind of condition that you expect it to be. So there's some retainage you got to expect from that. And so every time that a drop doesn't go into a bottle, that drop has to be paid for somewhere, somehow, and it usually transfers to the consumer. That's the reason why your barrel-aged beers will cost a little more.
Well, but they are very tasty. I always enjoy them, and I look forward to this time of year. And I can't wait to see what we talk about kind of here over the next few months, because we're getting into that winter season, and there are some unique things that are going to happen. And Kevin, I appreciate it as always.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's my pleasure.
Check out Hops and Spirits on social media at Hops Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find Hops and Spirits on YouTube and at hopspirits.com.
Joining us here on the Bar Conversations, he's a country artist, songwriter, and he's traveling as we talk. He's a multitasker if there ever was one. Welcome in, Jordan Rowe.
I appreciate you having me, Jonathan. We are excited, and we are on the way up to Green Bay right now. We've got Green Bay, Iowa City, and Springfield, Missouri this Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So today is just a travel day for us. So we got about 3.5 hours left.
Well, hopefully I'll entertain you for at least a little while, and you make the trip a little shorter. Now, since you're in a car, I'm guessing you're not going to be breaking any rules, having anything, a little harder to drink, so to speak. But if you could have a drink, what's one of your favorite go-tos?
Man, good old Miller Lite. That's my go-to. That's my go-to right there.
Nothing wrong with that. That's what I grew up on. That's my one of my favorite ones. Now, do you drink anything harder than a Miller Lite, or is it let's just behave ourselves and be smart?
Yeah, I try to behave myself, be smart most of the time. But I like to have a couple Miller Lights out there on the golf course or the hunting camp, whatnot.
I like it. That makes sense to me. I enjoy the same as well. Tonight, though, I want a little stronger, a little Rossville Union, little rye whiskey to.
I am in Kentucky, so there's a lot of great bourbon around me right now.
Well, and too, if you like beer, there's some good barrel-aged beer around you as well. Get a little Lexington Brewing Company, a little barrel-aged ale. That ain't half bad.
There you go.
Now, I know you're a smart guy, but is it true that you were valedictorian in high school?
Yeah, that is true. How did you find that one out?
I have my ways.
Yep, that is, man. That was like my 18-year-old feat right there. That was it. Now, how did you really find out? I'm curious.
You put it on in an old interview or something. It was something like 2 things you don't know about me: valedictorian, and then I think a little bit of taekwondo, maybe, or something like that. Am I in the right ballpark on that?
Yeah, man. I did taekwondo from I was younger. This was like before high school, but yeah, I was big in taekwondo. Into that when I was young. It was taekwondo and baseball was all I did growing up. So, but yeah, we used to go. That was the first time I traveled all over the country was for taekwondo tournaments. A lot of the places I'm going back to play music in now, I had been there before for a taekwondo tournament and did that whole thing. So it's been fun.
I was going to say, and I'm sure it's a little bit different experience in those towns now compared to then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was like 10 years old with my mom, dad, and grandparents when we were there, just did a little sparring match,
Now, what got you into that? I mean, were you watching like Karate Kid growing up and that's what you wanted to do, or did you just have a love for the martial arts?
Man, I want to say, I did watch that stuff growing up, but the guy who owned the martial arts studio in my hometown, he like came to our church and stuff like that and did some like youth group lock-ins and spoke at that kind of thing, and told us about the martial arts academy there, and I just really liked him, and I'm a super like goal-driven person, and he was like, if you want to learn how to be a goal-driven person and actually write something down and go after it, come try this out. So I remember being like 8 or 9 and writing down in a notebook at a youth lock-in at church, that I want to be a black belt, and another goal I wrote was I want to be a state champion in taekwondo. and I had no idea what Taekwondo even meant. But I was like, that sounds cool. And so, like, for the next several years, I chased that and did it. And so, like, that was, I guess, the start of being a goal-driven person was that right there. But Taekwondo, it does teach you a lot about, respect and self-discipline. And it was, I definitely think it had a lot of positive effects. So I would encourage anybody out there, go try it. It'll keep you flexible too, because definitely am not now.
Maybe I need to go back to that because things are popping when I move now, and it's not a good sign. It's not a good sign at all.
Oh yeah, I had a deep tissue massage yesterday, and I feel like I got hit by a bus this morning. It was rough.
And now you're sitting in a car for how many hours?
And
or a
now
van?
I'm sitting in a car. Now I'm sitting in a car for 8 hours today. Yeah.
So it'll be perfect. No issues. Now, you talk about being goal driven. I mean, was music ever one of those goals early on, or when did music kind of become part of the goals?
I would say it was a little later on. I was always involved in music, but most of that was playing and singing in church, and then local talent shows and that kind of thing. And then I did high school choir, and then got into college. And it wasn't really until I was in college that I kind of looked in the mirror and was like, okay, I actually think I can go after this. And I started to play actual shows while I was in college, and meeting some people in Nashville and kind of getting a feel for how it all actually worked, rather than it just being this like way out there dream. It was kind of becoming more closer, and it was kind of it was looking more like it could become a reality. And I started to see the avenues to pursue that, how you did that. So yeah, I'd probably say around probably sophomore year of college for me was kind of that moment. But when I actually was like, yeah, I think this, that I'm going to try to do this for sure. Now, if there was ever a moment, it was more of a gradual thing for me. But if there was ever a moment of like, hey, I want to do that the rest of my life, though it was, if there's any way possible, it was probably when I was like 15, maybe a little older, at a Luke Bryan farm tour show in my hometown. He came there, and it was Chris Jansen first of three, Sam Hunt direct support, and then Luke. I remember it like it was yesterday. That was like my first big concert, and I was like, man, I would love to do that right there. So,
well, and for you were going to school at the University of Georgia and traveling up to Nashville, right? Like doing that for a good little bit. I mean, what was that like?
It was fun, and that was the whole point of that for me, was just to try to have as much of a foothold on the town before I moved there. And so the first time I went to Nashville for any extended period of time was in the summer of 2018, and I had met Ray Fulcher earlier that year. And for anybody listening doesn't know Ray Fulcher, he's an artist in his own right. He's got his a new record deal now, and just now is getting on the radio. But before this, even back then in 2018, he was writing hits for Luke Combs. He was When It Rains, of course, his first #1, and he was writing those songs. He went to the UGA as well. Back in the day, he's a lot older. He's an old man, so I hope he hears this. But I met him at the Georgia Theater at a show, and we became buddies. And I needed an internship for a class credit that summer. This was summer before my senior year, and I didn't want to do just any regular old internship because I knew I was moving to Nashville. So I wanted, if I was doing it, I wanted it to count, And so I asked a publishing company up there if there was any way I could, they could create an internship position for me where I could come to Nashville and start writing. And so they did, and basically that turned into me, I was really doing nothing more than sorting an artist merch, and then taking out the trash on Wednesdays. And the whole other time, 4 or 5 days a week, I was writing songs. And I had called Ray up and was like, hey, I've got this internship. you have like a spare bedroom or a couch I can crash on? He's like, yeah, come on. And so I lived with him in the little guest bed for that whole summer. And I remember it was during my stay there that summer that he got the news, that When It Rains It Pours was working great at radio, and that was his first big single as a songwriter. And I remember him, like, we were in this little small rental house up in Hendersonville, north of town. I remember him running in and waking me up one morning, and he was all excited. He had just gotten his first check from When It Rains It Pours, and he said, "I'm going to get my phone fixed." So, but yeah,
It's the little things in life.
It's little things, man. But so that was, that whole summer I was learning, and I really was spoiled because I jumped right in there. The first summer I was there, I was writing with him, and guys like Cole Taylor, Thomas Archer, just guy. I had a good like Georgia foundation that was these hit songwriters, and they were so nice to reach down and kind of pull me up and take me in and welcome me in, and take a chance on me. And so I did that whole summer, and then went back and finished up my senior year of school, and then I moved up there as soon as I graduated in 2019.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you went to school, you got your degree, correct? And a little bit of business, a little agribusiness, a little agriculture, down there. I mean, that was that just backup just in case something went wrong, or did you just want to make sure you got that degree before you went to Nashville?
Man, kind of all the above. It was, I hate starting something and not finishing it. And so, I was like, I'm this far along, I want to finish it. I was having a great time at school. I loved that experience, and I didn't want to cut that short. Sometimes I wish I'd have, flunked a couple classes so I could stay there longer. But Athens is a fun town. But yeah, man, that, and then also, yeah, that was, just because who knows what could happen. I was like, at least I'll have this in my pocket if I ever need it. And so, I just ended up definitely helped my cause with the parents too. So it worked out. But yeah, we finished up there spring of 19 with ag business, ag econ, and music business. So that was another reason too, is I was doing music business, so I could kind of learn all that stuff before I moved up too.
I was gonna say that's a smart on you, because it's a crazy industry when you get into it. But I know you grew up in a small town in Georgia, too. What was it like growing up there, and what impact did that have on you as you look back on it all?
Man, I miss it. I miss it more and more. But it was just like the hallmark town. It's just a small little farming town in South Georgia, and it was like, we just got a Walmart, a few years ago. That was like the biggest news in a decade, right? So, you made your own fun. We didn't have a movie theater in our town. You had to drive 30 minutes for the closest kind of amenity, if you would. And so we just did a lot of, just like it is in the songs, right? Dirt roads, hunting, fishing, fires at the friends' houses, hanging out in people's barns. You entertained yourself, and everybody knew everybody. And it comes with all those pros and cons of that. And but I love it, and it was cool, man. It was a great place to grow up, and so I find myself singing about those kind of places a lot now.
Well, and we'll talk about some of those songs, but even before I want to get into that, because you mentioned it's a farming community. Georgia is known for the South and everything for being home to a lot of farms. You got the Support Local Farmers initiative with your merchandise, raising scholarship funds for students pursuing an education in agricultural. Why is that? Why was that something you wanted to do kind of so early and right away?
Man, like I say, I had went to school for that, grew up around it. My dad's a police officer. My mom works with the city, but all of my best friends and my cousins, and I grew up around farming my whole life. And when I was like high school jobs and that kind of thing, I was working in it, and so I always had appreciation for it. And like I say, went to college for it and was in the agriculture fraternity. And I knew when I was moving up to Nashville, I wanted to kind of marry those two ideas together of farming and music, and I was looking for a way to do that for a while. Um, and I actually, to support local farmers was a Why Not Lifestyle hat, and I just wore it because I loved it, and I was wearing it in a few videos, and people started commenting like, "Where'd you get that hat from?" And so I reached out to Why Not to see if they would give me a few to give away, because like, people are asking about this hat. And they said, "Well, we actually discontinued it, but if you want to do something with it, you can just use that design." I was like, "Okay, awesome." So uh, that was, kind of how it started for me. And so we came up with the idea to use it as our merch. And then, like, a portion of all those proceeds are going to a scholarship that's going to help a student go to college who wants to get an agriculture degree. And I think we're going to be able to give out the first scholarships this coming spring. So it's going to be fun, man. It's going to be exciting. People seem to love the idea and really support it at shows. What do you say?
I was going to say, I mean, it's got to be cool. I mean, you grew up in a small town. I mean, you know, and with everyone else, there's got to be other people that have grown up in small towns too that get to see that and just want to, sharing that support that you're doing and, sharing those experiences that you've had.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I talk to a lot of people at the meet and greets and the merch tables at the shows that come up and get some of that stuff and always tell me, my dad's a farmer, or we're farmers, my grandpa was, my best friend is, and it's fun conversations to have of what they grow and what generation they are of it. A lot of people are like 7th or 8th generation. It's crazy, man. But it's fun conversations to have for sure.
Well, and you mentioned that you've loved music. Obviously, you're going to Luke Bryan and things like that. It's kind of maybe when all this kicked into gear for you. What were some of your influences growing up, or who are some of your musical influences?
Oh man, like I say, I mean, Luke Bryan was Alan Jackson and Eric Church. I love their style of songwriting. And then, Luke Bryan, he was. Some people laugh at that. Like, how'd you grow up on Luke Bryan? I'm like, I'm only 25. Come on now. But when he was kind of hitting at radio was when I was 9, 10 years old. So, his early stuff.
Were you shaking it? Were you shaking it for everybody?
Oh yeah, for sure. No, but even the songs before that was what hooked me. We rode in trucks, which died in the 30s, which should have been a massive hit. That was like our life right there in a nutshell. And so everybody in South Georgia loved that song, and those whole first couple records, man, were some of my favorite. I wore the things out. So his early stuff was a huge influence on me and still is. And then, like I say, Alan Jackson, Eric Church, that'd probably be my top 3.
That's not a bad top 3 at all. I mean, when you really think about it. And two, like you said, you grew up in a small town. You were literally going down dirt roads. You were going to bonfires, hanging out at people's houses. I mean, I didn't grow up going down dirt roads, but I remember pretty much all the other stuff, even in the small town in West Virginia I grew up in. So, like, I totally get that. And like, is that truthfully where some of your ideas and stuff comes from for songs? Is just reliving and telling those stories of the fun you guys had?
Oh yeah, man, for sure. All the time, when I'm trying to think of lyrics, when we're in the writing room, I just picture stuff from back home that we've done and we've said. The funny thing to me is all of the sayings and stuff, that I grew up knowing that I'll say them in the writing room and people are like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, just the things that make all the sense in the world to me that people have no idea what you just said. That's what's funny to me. But yeah, I put some of those in the songs too, and I definitely draw a lot of inspiration from that.
Well, and you worked as a songwriter, like you said, before you kind of even took off as kind of an artist. What's it like working with others and writing with others or for others or even for yourself? Like when you get in those rooms, and everyone's kind of bringing in different perspective and ideas.
It's really fun. It's just as much fun to me as anything artist wise. when you get to go in and you write a good song and you have that feeling of, we might have did something special today. And I don't get to do a whole lot of artist rights, just for the sole fact of, trying to be an artist myself. Um, they try to keep me just with two strictly writers most of the time, but I have gotten to write with a few artists like Lee Bryce, for example, and that was really fun. And Lee's a great writer in his own right. And when I do get those opportunities, it's really fun to try to be a chameleon in the room and kind of adapt to whoever you're writing for, and put your head in their style and their sound and try to adapt to that. And I enjoy that. It's a good break from the norm, and that's always fun to me. Is whether it's going into an artist that's super super country, or even like if you get put in a more poppy room and try to come up with those kind of melodies, and too, it's refreshing, it's fun. But yeah, being a songwriter is something that means the world to me, as just as much as being an artist. I've gotten a couple cuts of like smaller unsigned artists, but still fighting for that first major cut. So there's, knock on wood, there's supposedly maybe one coming, but we'll see. So I'm still fighting for that, but we're just chopping away, man. It's fun.
Well, and I gotta ask, do all your good ideas come in the shower? I heard that's where your good ideas come from.
Not all of them, but a lot of them, man. And it's just funny. I need to look up the science behind that. Um, I know there's got to be some, but yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I guess it's just the mindlessness of it. But I get a ton of like melody ideas and song ideas in the shower. You know, grab my phone and hum a little voice memo in it, and that's how we got the 5 o'clock in the country chorus melody. It was just like, just started humming that in the shower one morning, and I was like, that's a pretty cool melody, and I'm just singing my phone, and that's it. But yeah, I mean, in the shower or riding around is where I get a lot of my song ideas, or either taking a trip home or something like that. That's what's crazy, is like you can go a couple months in Nashville and not hardly have any new song ideas, and you go home for one weekend and I'll come back with half a dozen. It's crazy. But just getting your eyes and your head somewhere else makes all the difference.
I just love. I feel like a lot of good ideas come to people in the shower or right before bed, like when they're trying to fall asleep. Then they think of the greatest idea, and you've just got to write it down, or you never will go to sleep.
100%. I can't tell you how many songs that I've dreamed, and I've asked this same thing to a bunch of other writers, and they all have the same experiences. But you'll be like in a dream, and you'll dream a whole song that's an original song that's great, better than anything you've written that whole week, and then you wake up and can't remember it, and it is the most frustrating thing in the world. And so I've gotten a little better at it, trying to, because how sometimes you'll be dreaming, but you can, like, you're thinking in your dream, you're dreaming sometimes, if that makes sense. So I've gotten a little better at that, and being able to wake myself up and write some of it down or hum some of it in my phone. But dude, it's wild, wildly frustrating when that happens. But that's how Alan Jackson wrote "Where Were You in the World Stopped Turning." He got that idea in a dream, from what I was told, and just leaned over, wrote it down on a notepad beside his bed, like everything at once.
Well, and you can't miss those opportunities. You got to get them written down. Maybe someone will invent some technology that'll let us know what's going on in our dreams and record those.
Yeah,
to help out.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned your new single, 5 o'clock in the country. I love it. It's fun. And you mentioned you recorded the melody. I think I read somewhere where like you brought that idea and they were like, oh, that's the melody? I thought that was like the first part of the song. So like explain just the song in general and just how much fun you had with it.
Yeah, so like I said, I got that. It was the chorus melody that I got in the shower, and then I was writing it with Hunter Phelps and Driver Williams. And if you're listening, Driver, Williams is the co-writer on Drink a Little Drink, Smoke a Little Smoke, but he's also been Eric Church's guitar player, lead guitar player for years and years. Super talented musician. And then Hunter Phelps, he's just killing it right now. He just got a triple play, which means he got 3 number ones, the songwriter in the same year. I mean, he's just crushing it. And we wrote that song like a year ago, probably. And so I was lucky to get in the room with those 2 guys. And I came in and I said, here's what I've got, this idea. And I kind of had, it wasn't the exact lyrics we ended up with, but, kind of most of them. And I hummed that. And I remember Hunter going, oh man, sweet, we already got a whole first verse. And I was like, no, that's the chorus. And he was like, oh, okay, let's have fun with this. And so, it was just, because it just sounds so much different than most things right now. And so we had a good time writing it. Driver came up with the little, the intro, the signature lick on guitar. He started playing that. And it was fun, man. It's a song that's got all kinds of genre influences, from bluegrass to gospel to rock.
Well, I was going to ask, you mentioned that you have it for a year. You wrote it a year ago and you just released it. How do you know to sit on a song, maybe, so to speak, or pull it out at a certain point? Like, how does that work for you?
Man, is there ever a right time? I don't
well,
even
that's
know.
fair. That's fair.
If you figure that out, you let me know. But no, man, there's so many variables that go into when to release a song that you get in your head about. Some of them I think matter. Some of them I wonder if they do. For example, they as being the all-knowing suggest not putting out a song after the first part of November because historically it'll get lost in the Christmas music shuffle, and everybody in town kind of checks out after Thanksgiving, and it's like a song really historically doesn't do well if it's released right before Christmas. But there's a gazillion other examples of that kind of thing that goes in your head when you talk about releasing a song, and you try to time it around maybe a tour or maybe whatever else random opportunity you have, or kind of what you'd put out before it, and try to keep that momentum going. There's so many things that go into it, and honestly, 5 o'clock in the country, I had planned on putting it out like April or May of this year, and then just one thing led to another, and it kept getting pushed back, and then ended up ultimately coming out July 29th. But yeah, that song was supposed to come out way earlier. And two, the way people consume music has changed so much recently. They consume it so much faster than they used to. And so, it's like, for example, Wallen put out a double album. I mean, that's just so many songs, and people are already over that and want something new, So the way you release music is definitely changing, and we're trying to figure that out and adapt to it. And to me, I think one of the best ways to release music right now is one song at a time, consistently. And so I think starting in the beginning of next year, that might, as of right now, is looking like my game plan is to consistently put out singles, because I'll be the first to tell you, we waited way too long to put out music after that first album came out, that first project, 8 songs. Man, if I could have those months back and go back and put something out and follow that, and then follow that, and then follow that. So I think next year, I would love to have a song out every 8 weeks or so. 7 or 8 weeks would be awesome, just to try to keep that momentum moving.
I was going to say, it's crazy when you say something like that, because I want to say it was maybe 3-4 years ago, and I still think it's true to this day. They said if you woke up a music exec from the 1950s, they would know what's going on. They'd be perfect for nowadays, because it was singles back then. It was just, there weren't albums. It was just a single and a vinyl, and that was it. And And like you said, everything's different. And when you're trying to figure out what to put out, how to put things out. Obviously, you put out an album in 2021. Bad Case of the Good Ole Boy. How do you balance putting out an album and putting out singles and trying to find that momentum and keep it going?
It's a moving target, and I don't and truthfully, nobody knows the answer. Um, and different things work for different people. Some people's fans love the whole record project. Some people's fans do better with consistent singles. I think every artist has to find what works for he or she, and I'm still working to figure that out. But like I said, I think the move for me is going to be to do consistent singles. At least right now, it's the way it's looking. Unless something else changes, but as of right now, I think that's the way to go. It's the way to go because people lose interest so fast. I mean, our attention spans are so short now as people. I mean, and so it's just on to the next thing, on to the next thing. So it's like you say, if you put out, if you go record 10 songs, I think you get a lot more mileage out of, being able to focus on each song individually and bring attention to it rather than, working promotion for the whole album itself, dropping it out on a single day, and everybody forgetting about it more and more from then on.
Well, now, but I will say you put out a really good album. I don't want you to downplay the album. You put out a really good album. What was it like working with? What was it like? I mean, for a debut album, let me run down. At least, I don't think I have everyone listed, but Lainey Wilson, Tracy Lawrence, Eddie Montgomery, Red Atkins. How did you pull that off? How on the debut album? How do you pull that off?
Man, it was fun. It was a lot of help from a lot of people, and so the Lainey thing happened. Lainey was one of my first friends in town. I met her like 2017 or 18. So I was already friends with her. Same thing with Ashlyn. And also
I knew I missed somebody. I knew Ashlyn Kraft.
Yeah,
I forgot about her.
yeah.
Yep.
We were all kind of running the same circle since I moved to town. And then Rhett, I knew him. I had ridden with him, I think once before we recorded that song. And then he invited me out, and I went deer hunting with him one time. And so I knew him. And so I just called him up and asked him, and he was down, and he was the first person I asked to feature on 10-4. And then Tracy and Eddie, I didn't know them. Tracy was the next ask, and we reached out to his manager and didn't hear anything back, and tried to reach out again, didn't hear anything back, and I was, no is the beginning of a conversation with me. I'm like, no, I'm gonna get it to him, because I didn't think at that point that he had even heard the song, and I knew Tracy enough, or like thought I did at least, that if he heard the song and knew Rhett was going to do it, that he would like the song. And so I was like, I got to know that he's heard it. If he hears it and he says no, fine, but I don't want just somebody on his team to say no for him. So my producer, Derek Wells, is good friends with Tracy's producer, and Tracy's producer actually mixed the demo for 10-4, Julian King, and I got Derek to get Julian to play it for Tracy and see if he liked it. So Tracy's producer played it for him, and he did like it and agreed to do it. And so, that was just me going out on a hunch and thinking he would like it. I just wanted him to be the one to say no if it happened, And then Eddie thing came from the publishing company that had my publishing deal is with, River House. They had an employee that used to work with Montgomery Gentry way back in the day, and had a good relationship with Eddie. And she reached out, sent him the song, told him that Rhett and Tracy was on board, and wanted to see if he was interested. And he really loved the song too. and he was all about anything bringing back a '90s country sound. So, but man, it was every single one of them was so nice and so fun to be in the room with working, and to get to see how they work on their level was really cool. And to, we sat around and told old stories, and they gave me life advice. I mean, it was an experience I won't ever forget.
I was gonna say, I mean, to me that sounds like a master class in country music. I mean, when you get down to it, I mean, you couldn't ask for better teachers than those three right there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, man, it was cool, and I got to go into the studio and actually watch Rhett and Tracy actually cut their vocal on the song. So that was really cool to see how they work and how they go about doing that. So it was awesome.
Well, and for you, obviously getting to do things like that, getting to be around others. I mean, well, I'll talk a little bit about a couple things here as we get closer to the end. But like, how have you evolved since being in Nashville? Because I feel like with anything, the more experience you get, the more people you're around, the better you're able to hone in on your craft. How have you evolved? How has your sound evolved? From those early days to now.
That's a hard one because I feel like in ways it's evolved, but in ways it almost evolved and now it's coming back. Because when a new guy moves to town, there's a lot of people in their ear. There's a lot of different sounds in their ear, and it's easy for you to start chasing things. And this is an age old story with a lot of artists that they'll get in town, and when you get to town, you're like, okay, this is me, and this kind of song I write. As you write more, you're hearing what's hot and what people are going for, and you kind of start chasing that a little bit. And then after a while, you go, you know what? I'm just going to be me. And you start you start getting back to yourself. And thankfully, I never went way out of who I was. Some people were like, man, if I could get those days back, I'm just not myself at all. That was never me. I never got too far from the sound.
You gotta love technology, and sometimes things happen when you're traveling, especially through Kentucky. I don't know where you're at now. You might be in Illinois. I don't know, because
idea,
there
honestly.
are some dead spots, I assume.
Yeah, I could not
so
even
things
tell
happen,
you where we
and we're good.
Yeah, I have no idea where we're at.
Obviously. Well, and that's okay because we'll figure this all out. We'll edit it all together. But I guess my next question is obviously it was awesome to record with Tracy and Eddie and Rhett, but and then evolve your sound, but also come back to it, because I do like that answer of you're still you. You're back to you've been you've been able to stay who you are. But with that, you're now playing shows where you're kind of the lead or you're on the bill, but that's not how it all started. I think I read where you were literally playing the tailgate shows for Luke Combs. So how has that transition gone for you?
Man, so that was the first really gigs I ever had in town when I moved here. I moved here in 2019, and then I got in the summer of 2019, and then that fall, just a couple months after, I got put on those tailgate shows, and those were acoustic shows. He was in arenas at that time. Jameson Rogers was first of three. Morgan Wallen was the opener, and Luke was the headliner. It was in arenas, and then I was playing by myself at like 5:30, and in like a separate little room right off to the side for everybody that got there early and was tailgate. So super fun experience, and it was kind of getting thrown in the deep end. So I didn't have anybody out there with me. I was riding around on bus number 4 with some of the crew guys, and just made family with them. And but everybody out there, they knew I was out there by myself. I was green as grass, I was like 21, 22, and Luke and Morgan Jameson and DJ Silver, he was out there DJ in between sets. Like, they were all so nice and inclusive of me, and was really great friends out there. And so that made like the transition into actual like touring shows so easy. Was having great people around me, and then I'm just a student of the game, and so like I don't. I mean, we have fun, but like when other people are out there performing, I'm not like goofing off in the back. Like, I'm paying attention, trying to learn. Watching people and how they perform the crowd on that roller coaster of energy, and trying to just pull different, different aspects of what I like about different people and put them into my own show. And so, I think if you watch us play now, you can see a lot of the influences that I got to watch live. I think Cody Johnson is a huge influence on me. He's one of my favorite artists of all time currently. And I've got to open, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 shows for him now. And it was, I think I've learned more than anybody from him, and just the way he carries himself, and he's just a man. And so I'm just study people out there and try to bring it over into our set. Have that same energy, and just takeaways, from each show.
Well, I think that goes back to you being a good student, being valedictorian. You're still putting that to work, even in your country music career. And with that said, because I don't want to leave the guys out, because you're traveling with, I think, your most of your band, right? So what's it like having everyone there and having a full band? Because yeah, you can do acoustic shows, but it's got to be a lot cooler to have all those guys around and travel with them.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, yeah, we got Tyler driving. We got Kenzie right here. I think Phil's laying down and asleep in the back. But yeah, it's a blast, man, and we have a lot of fun. We're all family out here, and at this level, when you're just starting out, you have a ton of different players. So, we've got probably, I don't know, three fiddle players to use, 2-3 drummers. Tyler's pretty consistent on guitar, but sometimes you have to give it up and let somebody else fill in. But we've got like a whole baseball team of players that come out and play with us, and so it's been fun, and we have a good time. And yeah, I mean, it adds so much more to the show than an acoustic show. And I love a good acoustic show, but your average country music fan, it's all about the band, and it just brings another level of energy to it that it's just not possible to get acoustic.
Well, and I feel like acoustic is always a good backup if it has to happen. And you talk about being able to have the full band. What's the best part about being on a stage and playing a show these days for you?
Man, I'd say just finding those few people in the crowd that you consistently see the song connect with, and focusing on them and just watching the magic happen. And the magic for me is just the words that you came up with in a writing room with a few of your friends, just connect and make an impact on somebody out there in the crowd. And on songs, first song that comes to mind is Mama Ain't Jesus. There's not a show goes by, whether there's like 8 people there or 8,000, it never fails. People will come up after the set and be like, man, you don't know how much Mom Ain't Jesus meant, or you might, you'll see people crying out there that might have just lost their mom, and it's like you see that song connect, and you hope that it can be a rock for them during that time. And that's my favorite thing about it. I love a good high energy song, but my favorite is seeing songs like that, a little deeper, connect with people. So that's the best part for me.
Well, and I'll say even the fun songs like 5 o'clock in the country, I can connect to that. And as we wrap up, you can find Jordan at jordanroweofficial.com, on social media at Jordan Rowe Music. I think you teased this a little bit, that obviously your goal is to go maybe a little more singles, maybe not an album, but are we going to get some more new music coming from you? Obviously you're doing shows, but what can people expect from you as we close out the calendar year?
Man, I think I'll be honest, and I honestly don't know. I'm leaning towards not putting out anything new before the end of the year. Like I say, it can get lost in the shuffle of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and it just, with playlisting and all that kind of thing, it's tough to navigate that time. So if I had to tell you where my head's at right now, it's just to finish out these shows, finish out the year strong, and then at the top of next year, we're going to be ready to press down on the gas, and I look forward to they're planning on putting out a lot of music next year, consistent songs. As of right now, yes, I would say those would be singles, but who knows? We might do an EP or something. But definitely can expect music early on next year, for sure.
I like it. A little tease, a little like it could happen, but maybe not. I like it. And Jordan, I appreciate you. I would say sharing a drink, but at least talking to me while you're traveling. And
there we go. Absolutely.
And this was a blast.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Find more from Hops and Spirits at hopspirits.com.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.